going to talk a little bit about my second book, the Eden Fruitarian Guidebook. I've had a few people recently ask me what's the difference between my second book and my first book. My second book is roughly 390 pages, so it's slightly bigger than my first book. It does cover a lot of the same kind of topics as my first book, but it goes into a lot more detail about things, and it gives a lot more practical advice on the way that we can, as individuals and collectively, improve matters for ourselves and for the world. One of the first chapters in the book is solely dedicated to the animals. I've been a vegan since the 1980s, so more than half my life now, and during that time I've probably heard every single vegan counter argument that exists. I've done my best to collect those counter arguments and stick them all in this first chapter, and I attempt to give a rational response to every single one of them. So let me just show you the table of contents, just to give you an idea of what to expect. So if there are any newbie vegans out there that are having trouble coming up with replies or responses to these arguments that are given to them against veganism, I think this book will be a good resource for them in that first chapter. For the animals, you may well find the answer to the question that's been thrown at you in that chapter. I also have a chapter dedicated to the plants, where I talk about the latest in plant research and try and explain a little bit more about plant perception, the way that plants perceive the world, the way they communicate with one another, the way they warn each other of threats, the way they prepare for attack in some ways, the way they basically perceive their environment and interact with their environment. But the research is starting to show there does appear to be some kind of intelligence behind this force of a plant life, which I don't personally have any doubts about, but for a lot of people I think it will help to show that that's the case, because I do believe that there's a soul force behind every living thing and being on this planet, and that soul force has its own reason to exist, which is independent of everything else. I also have chapters obviously dedicated to fruit and to the ecosystem and to the role that we humans play. In later chapters I talk about the bigger picture and sort of try to outline the insanity of the world that we live in, and why, in my opinion, how this has come about and what we can do to change that. I also talk about addiction, because this is such a huge thing in the world, really, that we're all addicted to something or another, whether it be food or whether it be some habit that we have which is detrimental to our own physical well-beings or mental well-beings or even spiritual well-beings. So I outline some ways that we can counter addiction and try to make things better for ourselves. This is a chapter I think that everybody will benefit from, including myself. I've written it for myself too, because I do acknowledge I'm human too. There are things that I'm addicted to. They may not be food issues, but there are other habits in my life which I know could be improved upon and would help me out physically, mentally and spiritually. So I'm working on myself too. We're all a work in progress, as it were. Towards the end of the book I have a chapter called FAQ, Frequently Asked Questions, and this chapter is solely answering questions that were given to me by readers of my first book. So there were people that read Destination Eden and they they contacted me and said, oh, Mango, what about this, or what about that? So I've tried to take all those questions that I got and stick them all in this book. So if you're one of these people that's given me a question and I never got time to respond to you, there's a good possibility that your question is in this book towards the end. My second book is not a sequel to my first book, not as such anyway. It's more of a complementary volume, so the two books can be read independently of each other, but nevertheless I think it's probably going to be better if the reader reads Destination Eden first, because I do talk about that in this book, and it is Destination Eden is the book where I introduce the philosophy of Eden Fruitarianism, which I talk further about in this book. So I think it will be of benefit to the reader to read them in order, but I don't think it's 100% necessary. There are people probably who are going to pick up this one first and read this before they see Destination Eden, and they're not going to lose out much by doing that. There's going to be a lot in here for them to get to. I think that sort of like covers it very briefly. What's in there? I think, quite honestly, I enjoyed writing this one probably more than I did enjoy writing the first one. Although I got to admit, towards the end, I was beginning to wonder if it would ever end. But I'm glad that I finally managed to finish it, and I'm glad that it's now published. And well, I like this one better than the first one, to be honest. I think that it's got more in it, more to bite on, more to chew on. Before I finish, if anybody has read either of my books, I would much appreciate if you can put a little review on Amazon, or you can go to my website, which is fruitnut.net, and I've got a guest book on there. You can write a little bit about it there if you want, because that's what it's for. I don't always check it. I'm having trouble with people spamming it quite often, so I go in there occasionally and delete the spam entries. But yeah, please feel free to have a look around there. I think that's about all. I wish you all a very pleasant day. Thank you for